I'm Cameron. I became vegetarian in 2016 initially. I think maybe May of 2016 it would have been. I had a friend who was vegan actually, and she had recommended that I watch the Cowspiracy documentary. And so I started off with like that. I was just like, it wasn't so much like I guess the animal rights, but I was just really like propelled by the environmental catastrophe that was looming, or so I thought, because of like meat consumption on a large scale. And so I just thought, oh God, this commodity meat and dairy industry, they're the worst, whatever, whatever. Never mind, like of course Monsanto and the soy crop and the whole. I mean, I was still eating processed foods, of course, as a vegetarian even initially. But so I made some definite adjustments to my diet as far as like trying to eat a little bit more healthy, but just as a response kind of to like seeing that documentary and then getting a conversation going with my friend, I just kind of realized, I want to be a little bit more health conscious. Like I'm not trying to, croak out here like in a couple of years. It's the American food supply. It's very questionable. So I just became a little bit more conscious of what I was eating. This is, like I said, May 2016, and was a vegetarian there until August of 2016. I moved from LA, where I was living, to Germany in Stuttgart, which is in the southwest of Germany for anyone who doesn't know. And there I actually started, I don't actually remember, honestly. I guess I just thought it was more environmentally sustainable. It was very ideological. But that was kind of my move from vegetarianism to veganism. And I didn't have any like initial fatigue. I just remember feeling like mostly pretty good. I think it probably was honeymoon. I started having like rashes and kind of like for me, zinc deficiency like symptoms, if that makes sense for anyone. But it's like where like around like your eye, it's just very like red, and I would like get rashes in the creases of my arms. And I had like heat rashes as a kid, but never really anything like this. And it was kind of like I didn't have a direct correlation to a certain food. I just would like randomly get it. I thought at first that it was like a cat allergy, so I went and actually had a test done. I was not allergic to cats according to this test. I also went to just like a standard medical doctor for like a general checkup there in Stuttgart, and I was told, everything looks fine in terms of your blood work and everything. Here, have a cream, essentially. And so I was like applying a cream, a topical cream, and so that became kind of like just standard for me day to day. And I was working like, just kind of like on the go. And so I was eating like a lot of like just pizza and things that were whatever vegan things I could get. So it was definitely not like a raw vegan diet. I was definitely undercooking lentils and beans though when I was attempting to cook. Like I'm still not great with beans and the exact amount of time and all of this, but now I'm a little bit closer to it. I've like learned to sprout things actually, and but at the time I had no sense of this, and so yeah. Let's see. So did you want to like interject with anything or?
No, it sounds fine.
Okay.
When did you start experiencing any kind of health issues?
Yeah, so like I said, August is when I went like full vegan initially. Probably it was like either late October, November of 2016. That's when I started like having, I mean, it was like also like winter Germany. I had never really been at that latitude living before through like a winter. So I was getting a lot less sunlight, I guess, than, LA where I had just been. And so I think I was just kind of thinking that it was a combination of these other things, but like many vegans, it just wasn't like registering to me that it could all be, I'd heard that your gut health was significantly benefited in all these different ways by being vegan. So I had some kind of concept of like the importance of like gut health and like having a strong intestinal lining and all this stuff, but I didn't think like this just overload of like oxalates and anti-nutrients was impacting me in any way. But in retrospect, of course it was. And I didn't even have, any of the things that are more native to our digestive system, like meats and loaded with like the collagen and all these different things that you need to actually kind of fortify that intestinal lining. These things just were not, so at the time I'm just like in total denial. I lived with a relative. She was not. with my aunt, she was not vegan, and so she was like kind of quietly concerned about things, but like never was like too whatever. Like she just was kind of letting me do my thing, and I just kind of insisted that everything was good, whatever, even though I had to resort to using a topical cream every day, and was like I said, just having these random rashes and like bone degeneration, like in a pretty major way. I feel like that it's something that I think like I had like an injury when I was younger, and so that I think it just kind of like exacerbated though, like this like a car wreck, and then I think the year of being vegan kind of just made the bones like really didn't have like a lot of density. And so then subsequently after being vegan, I actually had like another injury, which I think was, I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but I think it all just kind of compounded. And but I mean, it was a noticeable difference. Like I was just kind of achy at a certain point. I don't remember being like especially fatigued, but the obvious bad symptoms were mostly like, and like I said, this started probably like November 2016, but yeah, I would say it was really like to a point where I couldn't hardly deal with it. April of 2017, next year. In June of 2017 is when I started eating meat again. But basically just this, everything kind of, it was just this steady decline. Like at all these different symptoms again, I was just like totally, even though I didn't have, like I wasn't someone who was publicizing being vegan. It was obviously like ideological. There was definitely an ego component to it. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I didn't really, like that wasn't something I was publicizing, so I was just sort of privately like dealing with all of this, and the people around me weren't vegan, and so I just kind of sort of justified a lot of different things to myself. I didn't necessarily discuss the symptoms with some of the friends that I had that I was talking to back in the States. I had some friends in Germany who had only known me as vegan, so didn't really have a like comparison. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like I said, just to answer the question, a steady decline kind of throughout that year, and then it was only whenever I came back to the U.S. and started eating meat again that things got better. And even at that time, it was kind of actually like I wasn't. Well, I'm now eating like grass finished. I have like a direct like farmer that I know who like I know the situation at the farm kind of thing going on now. But when I initially came back, it was just kind of more like whatever meat seemed like it was a higher quality, but that was just like the general supermarket grass fed thing. And now it's like a different kind of scrutiny that I have. But
what did you notice when you started eating meat again? What symptoms were relieved, for example?
Pretty quickly, I stopped having any kind of like, so when I say autoimmunity, that's I guess kind of big. I would get these like, it wasn't just rashes on my skin, it would itch, like it was to a point of like like it would make you kind of crazy. And I kept thinking like, I'm sure it had to do with the lack of vitamin D being where I was in Germany and not eating any fish, not, all this stuff. But I think it was also just like the zinc you just aren't getting from plants. And that's a huge part of like your skin, it's like your actual, the elasticity of your skin and your ability to rapidly heal and repair and all this. So I would get this autoimmune like attack, my own immune system attacking like I said in the creases of my arms or sometimes like through my neck here. And then so it would be like these red spots, right? But then because of the lack of zinc, it was this vicious cycle. I would get the attack, it would take forever to heal, and it would just like get worse. I mean, I look back at it now and it's just crazy that it didn't even cross my mind that it would have had to do with just like the total lack of like I also have like Northern European Native American ancestry, and so it's like if I think about it, like I'm introducing a lot of lentils and anti-nutrients and all these things that like my ancestry wouldn't have encountered.
Did you also take supplements during the time, B12 or anything?
I just did the topical cream. I think I tried like occasionally I would try one. I was never like on anything long term. So
okay. Do you think that made any difference?
I suppose I could have been more managed, like a manageable vegan maybe and extended it. But for me, it was pretty dire. I really, within a year, like there was significant bone loss. Like I said, my gut health, it was crazy. I was like, having a reaction to everything, which is, I think, fairly common. I've actually come across like for a lot of people, especially in the paleo world, which is fairly big here in Texas, in Austin, Texas particularly. There's huge like headquarters like of all these different, like there's this company or like what was a startup and is now this big tech company called Paleo Hacks is down there, and there's a bunch of like a big like paleo community centered in Austin, Texas. So thankfully, kind of coming back to Texas when I returned, I was like, I feel like in that way it was really beneficial because I came across a lot of these people. I had a friend who actually worked there. So I was able to kind of just get good information on like get quality stuff, get bone broth, get these things, and this is like stuff that of course the ancestry, all of our ancestry knew, it's ancient traditions,
Mm-hmm.
but I just you kind of get caught up in this just like new way of thinking, and I think it's I don't know, it's almost like the lie of veganism is that it's like you're being primitive if you're not vegan or something, like you're kind of somehow like primitive is like a negative connotation though. I mean, it's like you are if you're not vegan, but you're like it has a negative connotation, and it's almost like, oh, I'm transcending that. And it's almost, if you think about it, this like broader like transhuman new world order, like Agenda 21 kind of connection. I mean, it's all actually, it really does kind of line up if you give it any thought, actually. I mean, I guess I would occasionally take like a spirulina thing, like these little powders, I would get like spirulina powder, and supposedly you're getting some B12 from that, which is of course like different, completely different.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
so
Did you also have any vegan friends, any contacts?
yeah. So my friend who was in Sweden, who I had seen that August, when I think that was probably around the time I went vegan, but it wasn't because of her. She is actually the friend of mine who I'd mentioned before, who initially put me on to the Cowspiracy documentary, which I went vegetarian because of. But so at any rate, when I came to Europe, I went to visit her, and yeah, she's, I believe, still vegetarian. I don't know her exactly where she's at with it. We haven't really been in touch in the past like 5 months or so, but eventually I'll follow up with her. But yeah, she's a great friend of mine, previously a roommate, but she was a big part of like my kind of, I guess, believing that you could kind of maintain, because she kind of had like a pep about her, and like there were some like vegan friends that I had met like when I went to visit her, and they were all seemed kind of like, it wasn't like they were lacking energy. Of course, they could have just been like on a sugar high, and I just saw them at the tip.
Right.
But I'm now realizing how it's, and through your channel as well, I'll say thank you. I discovered Natasha Campbell McBride, and she talks about this recycling of energy. Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride, she talks about this recycling of energy from the sun and through photosynthesis, plants, making a physical matter of this sunlight energy. And then, of course, the herbivores consume the plants, and then like how we're actually a part of this, like, it just really puts it all in context. Like it's really kind of lacking humility in a way to be vegan, because we are like, this is where we're at in terms of the food chain. Like we've evolved to this place, and I think it's just kind of lost on people. I had another friend, when I was like younger, who I know had to go off of it. I mean, it's like before I even actually went vegan, she had already she was kind of ahead of the curve, like very progressive or whatever. And but I think I remember being at a summer camp working with this friend, and she like had to like leave because she had to go have a doctor's appointment. She was just talking about how she was chronically fatigued, and I remember her saying, she's vegan because the chef there actually made her like a different meal and made the vegans a different meal. It was a very like unique summer camp. But yeah, I remember she had to go back to eating eggs, and so yeah, and that was like what kind of like saved her and like revived her, and she was like very energized at camp again. So
Right.
thanks to eggs.
How do you see the future of veganism?
Unfortunately, I do. I mean, I don't trust I'll say I'm not hopeful of the willpower of like the general population to resist this being imposed on us. People are very asleep, especially in America. People defend fluoride. They defend being fluoridated, their municipal water being fluoridated. Like, why do you want something like that added to your water? Why wouldn't you just want like a neutral water? Like, who knows? But people defend it because our public health agencies say that it's something that's good with your dental, blah, blah, blah. Well, people are dumber because of that, among many other things, including the GMOs and all this. So I don't really see, I see in terms of veganism, I do believe it's a part of a greater agenda. I do believe there are obviously decent like vegans who are actually doing it for the same reasons that I was. I acknowledge that. But and I think that people who are like ex-vegans tend to be some of like the best, the most aware people that you can encounter, because they're like really acutely, they understand that like there's a big industrial like push, this huge supply chain. I mean, if Monsanto can't insert itself into everything, I mean, they're totally, you have these GMO, the soy, what's it called? Impossible foods They like got hit with the lawsuit. This company that does all these like non-meat, like fake meat things or whatever, got hit with the lawsuit because they hadn't gone through like the correct, like the FBA didn't officially approve them or something like that. So I mean, but even then, you cannot trust the governmental agencies in the U.S. I know in Europe they're a little bit more reliable. I understand you guys have some better, but the general population, at least here, leaves a lot to be desired. People are not very aware of just. I mean, you just think if there's anything that you're going to pay any attention to in your life, it's going to be the food that you're what you rely on to sustain yourself. I mean, to the extent that you want to live, you have to care about that, right? You think, but people here don't really see things that way. And maybe in the general world, I don't know, people just, yeah. So that's kind of philosophical and broad, but I do feel like it's connected to, like, my initial going to veganism was ideological and it was philosophical. And so I like to just kind of, like, for anyone who might be listening, I want to push back a little bit, I think, on this idea of, like, primitive shouldn't have a negative connotation.
Do you want to add anything else? Anything you remember? Some experience, something important you want to share, or anything you want to say to any vegans watching?
Yeah, there are a lot of different experiences, but yeah, I would just say overall, I mean, I endured a lot of suffering just from like a purely ideological place. Don't do that. Concern yourself with learning about nutrition first and foremost, and then I would just say keep the ideological dieting on the back burner. I mean, for me, the simplest thing I can say to anyone is defer to the ancient wisdom. Like there are all these traditions that we have that are totally like, worth, passing on and continuing. And so I would say just kind of like, don't be too ideological. Listen to your body when you're having issues. Acknowledge it. Be real. I think it's easier said than done, but I guess just have the humility to admit that what you're doing might not be working, and to just kind of like honor your body's response. So.
Okay. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.